Right. So we'll start understanding .NET Core Web API interview questions and answers. Okay. So especially these questions you can expect the interviews for the experienced people basically. So the first question is, what is .NET Core Web API and how it is different from ASP.NET MVC, or even it can be how it is different from ASP.NET Core MVC. Okay. So let me explain the primary difference. If you are having a .NET, sorry, let us say you are having .NET Core Web API. Okay. So if someone is sending a request, okay, this .NET Core Web API can able to send response. This response can contain only data. It cannot contain UI. Okay. UI like HTML, CSS or anything. Basically, it the response will not be having UI. Okay, it will be having only data. In which format? Normally, data you can able to transfer it either by using JSON format or XML format. Nowadays, almost no one is using XML. So by default, it will be JSON only. You know already JSON. Okay. So when we are explaining, I think I took several sessions on JSON. How to create an array, how to create an object, how to read the data present in object. Many things we already learned. Okay. So tell me what is the main, see when you are learning interview questions and answers, always I told you to remember the answers through diagrammatic approach. That theory, okay, but you have to convert it into a diagram. Okay. .NET Core Web API will give response. That response will contain only data. That is in JSON format or in XML format. The important point is it cannot return UI. Okay, then what about that .NET Core Web, sorry, ASP.NET Core MVC? That is the question, right? What is the difference between Web API, .NET Core Web API and ASP.NET Core MVC? What is the difference? When a request comes from any client, MVC can able to return response. That response will be having UI. Okay, response will be, it will render the UI as output, as a response. That is the primary difference. Clear, right? Okay. So when you are implementing .NET Core Web API, so tell me what exactly you will write. You will create one controller. Okay, controller is a class, and that controller will be having methods. What are those methods technically called as endpoints? What are those methods technically called as endpoint? Same in .NET Core MVC also. When you are creating ASP.NET Core MVC, again you have to create a controller, and each controller will be having endpoints or methods. Okay, action methods we call it as in MVC. In Web API we will call it as endpoint. Okay, but finally it is C# method only. Okay, just for your understanding, that's all. Clear with answer, right? Tracking interviews is easy if you remember diagrams. So from that diagram you must be able to frame the statement and then give the answer. Okay. Next, is it possible to call Web API from applications written by using other technologies? For example, let us say I have a .NET Core Web API application. Okay. Now I have an Android app created by some Android programmers, and someone created an application by using Python. Someone created an application by using Java. Someone created an application by using a .NET. Okay. So this .NET Core Web API will give data present in some database. No one else is having access. Only .NET Core Web API is having access. Now this database data, Android application want, Python application want, Java application want, .NET application. Now the question is, .NET Core Web API application, whether Python can able to access it or not, because it is written in .NET. Okay. Android application can able to access it or not. Java application can able to access it or not. Answer is yes, because they must send the request, HTTP request. Okay. Any technology written client. Okay, these are called as client applications. Correct? No? Client is an application which requires data. .NET Core Web API is a service. It will give the data. Okay. So anyone send a request by using HTTP, it will send the response. It will send the response. So the .NET Core Web API will give the response. The response will contain what? JSON data or XML data. Normally not XML, it is JSON. Okay. Even if a Python application is calling, same procedure. They have to send HTTP request. .NET Core Web API will give HTTP response. That response contains JSON data. Now the application can be client application, can be any type of application. So what is the answer for this question? Yes, the client must communicate using HTTP protocol. That is what we said. Correct, no? Now you can elaborate in the interview. So any client can able to communicate. Client written by using Python, client written by using Ruby on Rails, Java, Android, any kind of application can able to communicate with our .NET Core Web API. Okay, it is not only .NET client. Okay, even .NET application can able to communicate. No doubt. Right? Clear, right? Now the next question is, what is middleware in ASP.NET Core? Okay, ASP.NET Core means again ASP.NET Core Web API. Remember, in the interviews they will ask you, are you aware of ASP.NET Core? It means that they are directly or indirectly asking about .NET Core Web API. Many will call it as ASP.NET Core Web API. Okay, both are same one. Okay, so can you give some examples? What is a middleware in ASP.NET Core? And can you give examples? So tell me, you already learned this in Angular also. Same middleware in Angular. What is called as middleware? Interceptor. It is exactly same. Okay. So tell me, what is the purpose of middleware in ASP.NET Core Web API? The interceptor can able to take the incoming request, and if you want, you can modify the request data, and it can able to send it to some other middleware. Okay, by using next method. Okay, so whatever it is. So let me give the uh, answer precisely. Okay, always remember a diagram for each question. Okay, make your own diagram. Okay, that is the important thing. Otherwise, remembering so many answers will be very difficult. Okay, don't remember answer directly like this. Not good idea. Okay, so what is good idea? Convert it into a diagram. Okay, best practice. Okay, so now what is a middleware? So for example, I am having some .NET Core API application, web API. Okay, I defined a middleware. How many middlewares we can able to create? Any number of middlewares. Okay, okay, so middleware, and there can be lot of controllers, and each controller may be having what? Endpoints, methods. Okay, endpoint one, endpoint two, like that. Okay, now let us say someone is sending a request, some client is sending a request. That request will carry some data, correct? No? For some reason, I wanted to modify that request data. First request will be handled by middleware. Middleware will automatically get executed, and then it will read the, if you write the code in the middleware properly, you can able to read that request data and you can modify that request. Okay, you can modify the request and send the request data to another middleware. Again, that middleware can able to modify the request, and again it can able to send it to next request. So finally, the corresponding controller's endpoint will be executed, and the endpoint will give the response. Okay, again if you want, you can modify the response in the middleware. You have to define the middlewares properly, and finally you can able to send it back. So tell me, what is the purpose of a middleware? Middleware will handle the incoming request, If required, it can able to modify. You can able to modify, and finally, while sending the response also, even if you want, you can modify the response, send it back to the client. Okay. So tell me where exactly we used. Okay, where exactly we used, or where exactly we use middlewares. Okay, middlewares commonly used for handling the exceptions. Normally in real-time project, we already understood. We did, correct? So if any exception is occurring, I wanted to log that exception details into some database. I can do it. Okay. For exception handling, we can create a middleware. Not only that, we created a middleware for something else also. Tell me what exactly we have done? JWT token, correct? So first the request will be handled by the middleware, and then it will create JWT token for many things. Okay, not only that. Okay. So middleware is a software component that will be used for modifying incoming request and outgoing response. Clear? It is almost equivalent to our Angular intercept. Okay. Middleware can modify request or response and can transfer the modified request or response to the another middleware in the pipeline. Okay. So believe you understood. Here middleware, there interceptor. Both are same. Okay. Clear? But remember, when you want to crack the interviews, diagram will help you. Okay. Don't remember the theory. Okay. I was telling Naveen several times, correct? No? Not only Naveen, for everyone it will be useful. Okay. For every answer, make one diagram. Remember the diagram. You can able to answer this. Okay. Clear? Now, this answer you already know. What is the difference between MVC and Web API? MVC means .NET Core, ASP.NET Core MVC, and Web.NET Core Web API. What is the difference? Web API will give the response which contains only data. .NET Core MVC can able to return UI. Okay. Anyhow, by using .NET Core MVC also, we can able to return the data also. Okay. But that will be a rare scenario. The MVC is used for returning the UIs only. Okay. So I believe you understood. So that is it. See very clearly MVC controller's action method. What is this AM means? Controller will be having a method. That method will be normally called as action method. Normally in C# we call it as method. In Web API, sorry, in MVC we call it as action method. In .NET Core Web API we will call it as endpoint. Okay. Here not AM, it is endpoint usually. Some people will call it as action method also. Okay. So it returns what? Data, JSON or XML. That is the primary difference. Okay. But remember, MVC can also be able to return the data also. Okay. So if you can able to apply some special attribute on action methods, it can able to return the data also. That is possible. Is it possible to return view from Web API? Answer is no. Web APIs are designed for returning the data only. Okay. RESTful services, we call it as. Okay. What does that REST mean? Representational state transfer means object in the same format we cannot be able to return. Okay. Let me explain that also. This question. Is it possible to return view from Web API? View means some output, visible output. That is not possible. Okay. You can able to return only data. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. So what exactly I thought of saying? I thought of saying something. Restful, yes, yes, yes. Rest. Okay. Before going to the rest, okay, that question is also there, but I'll explain. Normally, when you think about C sharp, you will be having a class, correct? So you will create object for the class like this. Am I correct? So in whichever the computer this code is getting executed, when this code is executed, an object will be created. Am I correct? Okay. Yes or no? This object will be having data. You cannot be able to directly send this object from this computer X to another computer Y. Not possible. Object in as it is format you cannot send. If you want to send the object, you have to stream, either JSON stream or XML stream. That is the purpose of the JSON. Tell me, what is the purpose of JSON? JSON is used for data transfer from one computer to another application to another application. I already told you. If I want to send this object from one computer to another computer, what I should do? I must convert this object into JSON format. Okay. You know, in JSON, object will be represented by using curly brackets. Okay. So that object I can able from one application to another application. Okay. So anyhow, rest means what? Not taking rest. Correct. Representational state transfer. Okay. State means the situation, in what kind of situation it is there. Okay, that object will be having some name, age, some variables and values will be there. Exactly that state of the object will be transferred. Representational state transfer. Object will be represented in some format and then it will be transferred. Okay, either in JSON format or in XML format. You are very much aware of JSON. Okay, how to create an array, what is the format of an array in JSON, what is the object format, all those things you know. Okay, so now this session is not about explaining again that JSON. Correct? No? Clear with this answer? Yes or no? Now let us go to the next question. Next question is resistance. So very easily we can answer. REST refers to representational state transfer. It is designed for transporting an object from one computer to another computer, from one application to another application, not in the exactly object format. It will be converted into some JSON format or XML format and then will be transferred. It is used for designing web services and APIs. Okay, now web services is outdated concept. Okay, instead of web services, now we got APIs, application programming interfaces. Okay, .NET Core Web API. What will be there in that REST? REST is basically having some constraints and principles. Okay, whoever wanted to exchange data by using REST, they have to follow certain constraints and principles. What are the principles? Okay, I'll explain that later. But remember, if any application is using REST, okay, they must be able to send a request. That request must contain some data, and then that REST service will send some output back. Okay, response. Even that also will contain some data. Now, what are those principles? Okay, REST principles. Okay, so tell me, what are the REST principles? REST can able to communicate only by using HTTP protocol, and it is stateless in nature. Stateless means it cannot remember the information. For example, you are having a .NET Core Web API, which is a RESTful service. Okay, when you send a request to the .NET Core Web API, let me show you. Diagrammatically, I will show you. Let's say you are having .NET Core Web API, which takes the data from some database and gives it to other client applications. Okay. Now let us say your client designed in some language or technology, maybe Android or Python, anything that is not important. This client is sending request to .NET Core Web API. Okay. So what .NET Core Web API will do? It will execute the appropriate controllers endpoint. Endpoint means it is a method basically. Correct? No? So method will be executed. This method may be retrieving the data from database and then it will send the response back to the client. After sending the response, it will prepare the response. This response will be sent back to the client. After that, this response will be deleted. Okay. Even this incoming request also will be deleted. Once the response is given, no request, no response. Nothing will be stored by the .NET Core Web API. That is the reason why it is called as stateless. Okay. I think you would have heard, you would have seen that Gajini movie. Correct? No? You will not remember. Exactly same. Stateless means that. That is the reason why, to make you remember that, I showed that diagram. See this. Okay. You will not remember. Okay. So RESTful service will communicate by using HTTP protocol. Okay, and it is stateless in nature, and it allows caching. Means what does that mean? Once a response is sent to the client, client can able to happily store that response. That is what is called as caching. Okay, so this web API or RESTful services will not say that I will give you the response, you don't store it. You can store it. It allows caching. Okay, even not only that, actually stateless RESTful service itself can able to support caching. For example, if you send a request, okay, to the REST API, okay, first first client sent a request. Okay, it has retrieved the data from database. Okay, then given the response. Another client is asking for the same data. Again, it won't execute the code. It will store that previous response. Okay, and then it can able to give it. Okay, it can catch that previous output and then can able to give it. Okay, so don't compare it with the stateless nature. That is different. This is different. But remember, it supports caching and allows caching. Okay, and the RESTful services will use HTTP verbs like HTTP get, post, put, delete, patch. You already knows about this. Correct, no? You tell me what is the purpose of get, what is the purpose of post, put, delete. Okay, not the answer for this question, but for next question. When will you use HTTP get? For retrieving a resource. Okay, don't say for retrieving data. Don't say data. You instead of calling it as data, resource you call it. Especially when you are answering the questions in the interviews. Clear, no? Okay. Now, what are the REST principles? Okay. What are the REST principles and constraints? Majorly, it supports 4 principles and constraints. First one is REST must support client-server architecture. Okay. I already explained through the diagram. Same client-server architecture. This principle says that client and server should be independent of each other. Means once the communication is over between client and server, you do any modification in client, it will not be affecting the server. Okay, you do any modification in the server, it will not be affecting the client. Okay, that is what is called as client server architecture. Both must be independent of each other. Okay, it means that changes in client must not affect server, changes in server must not affect client. Okay, stateless I already explained. Okay, cacheability I already explained. Uniform interface, somehow you remember this point. Okay, nothing much to explain. This constraint says that we must consistently access resources using uniform way. Means any kind client can able to communicate. Android client, Python client, Java client, PHP client, anyone can able to uniformly access my RESTful service. Okay, that is what it is. Okay, clear? Now, this question answer you already know. What are the HTTP verbs or methods used in RESTful services? Okay, HTTP protocol supports verbs or functions like HTTP get, post, put, delete, patch. Okay, then explain about each one. Okay, so get is used for retrieving the services. Okay, post is used for creating a resource. Okay, in fact, it is used for inserting data in the database terminology. But normally, the APIs are not only used for communicating to database. We can do different tasks. That is the reason why instead of saying data, you can call it as resource. Better. Okay. So put is used for modifying the resource, updating the resource. Delete for deleting resource. Patch is for partially updating the resource. Okay. So this is the answer for this question. Now, what are the different HTTP status codes? Okay, when you send a request from client to server, client to web API, sometimes web API will give status codes. Not sometimes, every time. With all, every time when response is sent back to the client, along with the response, it will give status codes also, so that the client can able to really understand what really happened in the API. Okay, what are the important status codes? 404 and 500. 404 means resource not found. Okay. 500 means internal server error. But apart from that, you need to remember the numberings. 100 series means informational messages. 200 series. 200 series means 200 or 201. Several things are there. But 200 refers to success messages. 300 refers to redirects. Okay. 400 refers to client errors. 500 refers to server errors. Okay. I already explained all these things. Okay. Some time back. Okay. Now, what is routing in Web API? Okay. So, let me briefly explain. Okay. Because some time back we understood Web API. There may be a chance that you would have forgot these things. Okay. So, .NET for Web API. Okay. So, let us say there are lot of controllers. There is a controller called as a controller. This is having method 1, method 2. Method means endpoint. Okay, there is a B controller, M3, M1, like this. So many endpoints are there, methods are there. Now, a client is sending a request. Now, in order to give response, one of these methods must be executed. One of these endpoints must be executed. Then only it can able to give the response. Then how .NET Core Web API will decide which endpoint has to get executed based on the URL. Okay. The client must send the URL. The based on that URL, okay, and based on the HTTP verb being used, the .NET Core Web API will decide which action method or which endpoint must be decided. How it will decide? By using routing technique. Okay. So I will just show you example. Let us say in the request, the requested URL is looking something like this. HTTP, the .NET Core Web API would have been hosted in some domain name. Okay. Let us say my domain name is xyz.com. xyz.com. And let us say a/m1. What does that mean? Now, by looking at this URL, by using routing technique, it will understand .NET Core Web API will understand that request is coming to a controller and to which action method? Okay, like this. Right. Now, the question here is, yeah, one more thing. In the request, we must have mentioned, we must have specified the verb also, HTTP verb. Okay, get. Now, what does that mean? In this a controller, any method which is having HTTP get, that will get executed. Okay. Now, for example, my method name is M100, but I didn't mention that M100. Let's say for some reason. Now, which method will get executed? There are so many methods. Now, based on this verb, the execution will happen. Okay. Based on this verb, execution will happen. All these things will be decided by using routing technique. In simple words, now you read this. Routing will help the web API in finding the endpoint based on the URL in the incoming request. Matching to the answer? Explanation? Yeah, same. Okay. Web API supports two types of routing techniques. One is conventional routing, which no one will be using. Second one is attribute routing. So in our projects, whenever we are doing samples, every time we used attribute routing only. I think you would have written a square bracket route. Okay. And you can able to specify something over here. That is basically attribute routing. Okay. So square bracket, you place something that is called as attribute as per C# terminology. Right. If you have studied C# properly, attributes concept is there. Okay. Attributes will be represented by using square bracket. Same thing. Okay. So there are two ways to implement routing: conventional routing and attribute routing. Okay, I recommend you to remember some answers related to attribute routing. Okay, some examples basically. Okay. Next question is obviously what is attribute routing in web API? Attribute routing will allow developers to create a new route using route attribute decorator. Okay. Now observe carefully. I'll explain what is the meaning of this. You see, there is a controller. What is the name of the controller? Patient controller. It is inheriting from API controller. We know every web API controller must inherit from API controller. Correct? So now I created a method called as some FJKN, some dummy method. Okay. Or get list of patients. Some method. Okay. Now this is there in the this code is there in the web API. This is there in the .NET Core web API. Now a client means anyone, Android application, Python, anything. Now they wanted to get the response from this one. Okay. Now you observe the route over here, API slash patient slash list. Now what this client will do? Let us say client will initiate a call to the web API by using URL something like this. HTTP that website name slash API slash patient slash list. Now what is the actual meaning of this? See, whenever this URL is sent, whenever this URL is sent to the web API, normally web API will look for what? Web API will look for the controller with the name patient. Is it there? Yes, it is there. And then it will look for the method with the name list, but that method is not available. What is the method name? Method name is get list of patients, or maybe this FJK, NJ, some dummy method I have given. Now there is no such kind of method. There is no list method. What it will do? You created one route, right? Okay, this route will be added into something called as route table. Web API will internally prepare route table. Okay. Now the route name is API slash patient slash list. Okay. What is the actual endpoint name? Endpoint name is get list of patients. Assume that this is the actual method name in place of. Now that will be stored in the route table. Now whenever the route is having list and then patient, automatically web API will give request to this. You understood? No? URL is something different, but my method name is something different. You understood, right? Yes or no? No. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay. So what I am trying to explain here is your method name can be something different. Okay. Here in the URL, you can expose the URL in a different way. Okay. It is not necessary to this term, no need to match it with this method name. By using a routing technique, you can change. To the end users, you can show something differently. But actually in the code, you can use different method. Right? So how will you match this one with this one? Actually, the web API will search for the method with the name list. Web API will actually search for the method with the name list in the patient controller. But there is no such kind of method. But still request will go to this method. How I can able to do? By using route. The exposed URL is different, but actually the method which is going to be executed in web API is different. Why that is required? That is secondary story. But you can do. Correct? Yes, sir. Okay, that's all. Now, the next question. What is, we will discuss about these things next. Till here complete. Correct? 10. So tomorrow I'll explain about parameter binding, then Dependency injection, you already know. In Angular also it is same thing. Content negotiation. Okay, I'll explain. Media format I'll explain. Model binding and model validation we will explain. Filters present in .NET Core Web API I'll explain. Then authorize attribute. What is use? How will you secure Web API? We already written the code for this. JWT token creation, and then applying role attribute on top of the action method. All those things we will discuss anyhow. How to create a custom route. Okay, somehow it is related to that current answer whichever we understood. Okay, custom route. And then last one will be how to pass session in Web API. In fact, it is not possible because it is stateless. Okay, then last one, when to choose Web API. We will discuss tomorrow. Okay, that's all. Next session I will explain about the remaining things. Okay, but remember, very easy. Okay, .NET, sorry, Angular preparation is over. .NET Core Web API preparation also will be getting over. Okay, so more than this, no one will ask you the questions. In case if I am missing anything, if you come across, okay, when you are attending the interviews, let me know, that I will add. Mostly these things. Okay, so tomorrow morning around. That's all. Thank you.